Hello my friends, how are you doing? I gave a talk on the ComfyUI Leadership Summit that happened in Los Angeles about a week ago. I was invited there and I talked about AI in the creative process. This is not just about ComfyUI, it's about AI in general, because I think there are some things that we are missing, so this might be very interesting to you. Of course, the question here is, where does AI fit into the creative process? And one of the things that I think is we try to do too much at once with AI. A big problem that AI has, it's not very precise, it has a lot of errors in there, but also it doesn't really take into consideration the creative process itself. Here I want to start with an anecdote or a part from the book by Miyazaki. He is the director, he is the artist behind the Ghibli movies. He wrote a book, it's called The Starting Point. And in that book, he's talking about the animation of walking. And I found it really interesting that he says the walking animation is an illusion. It is not like in real life. So you couldn't just record a person and then draw over it, because it would not work like that and it would look very strange. He's also not a fan of when Disney tried to do that in their movies. So when you look on the image here on the left side, you can see three characters of three different ages. And what Miyazaki says is that the expression of their body movement is not just how they move because of their age and size. It also talks about their character, their expressiveness, their power, their role inside of the movie. So for example, a normal soldier wouldn't run in the same way as the hero would, because the hero has more expressiveness and prowess and has more power in there, because the hero is different as a character from a normal soldier in the movie. And also here when we see these two different children, they would walk, they would run, they would play in different ways to express their character, not just for the physical movement. Here's a classic meme that you might know, especially if you're an artist, is about how to learn how to draw an owl. And of course you start with the two circles as a basis and then you just finish the owl. And this was very funny to us when we learned to draw, because, well, it doesn't tell you anything about how to draw an owl, but back then, we didn't have the technology to just use a prompt, so this wasn't even a possibility, but now it is. The problem with that is artistic processes are like a puzzle where you need to figure out the different elements, how they fit together, the style, the techniques, the expression, the composition that you want to use to get exactly the expression that you want to give artistically. All these layers, all these many stages we have inside of a creative process, they are not just there because we didn't have the tools to do it otherwise. They are there because they represent the different ideas and concepts, the different iterations, the different changes, and also often the work of many people who work together on the creative process to create an artwork, a film, an expressive piece of art. So this is where culture is created. This is where art is created, where the philosophy of our society, of our expressiveness is created by iterating, thinking, redoing, by creating new layers, by taking layers away. All this complex process is needed because we need to figure out what we actually want to say artistically when we create a work. And of course, this has a lot of complexity. Here we have a famous painting by Alma Tadema. It's called A Reading for Homer. Now, you might be able to create something similar with AI, although in AI, there is a lot of problems with the composition, with the dynamic, especially between multiple characters and also with the expressiveness. Now, to the untrained eye, one image might look like the other image, and there might not be much behind that as long as the image is beautiful to look at. But here I put some lines over this image to show you some parts of the composition. There's a lot more thought in there. I'm not even talking about the materials, the colors, the light and the darkness. I'm just talking about the compositional elements here. So when you look at the red arrows, you will see that all of the bodies are placed in a way where they point towards the main character on the right side. All of them are listening to Homer telling his story, but also all of the bodies are arcing towards him. The person lying on the ground is bent upwards towards his face. The couple in the background is holding their hands pointing forwards at the character. Even the architecture in the background has lines going to our main character. Then you can see other elements with the yellow lines. So on the left side, we have a character blocking the view out to the left side. And on the right side, we have the seating area and the back wall blocking your eyes to leaving the image to the right side. Now, these are techniques that are also used today in composition, especially in game design, in the concept art for movies, but also, of course, in the composition of movie scenes, so that you know where to look and that your eyes don't leave the image. Another interesting element you can see here is marked by the blue line. So you will recognize that the left side of the image is very busy. There's a lot of things going on that describe the world, the characters, that set up the scene, that create the story for you and the environment. But then you will realize on the right side of the image there's almost nothing going on. The main character is on its own, and we can really focus on the main character and how the main character is holding that scroll, how he's bending forwards to the people who are listening to his tale. So this is also a classic concept of art, to have areas that are more or less busy in the image. So you can see there's a lot of planning going into that. And of course, no element in this image is there by accident. Everything has been meticulously planned to give a certain expression, tell a certain story, and create this artistic expression. When we think about the artistic process, in the past, the artists had one big problem, and that was that we start with the white canvas, and the white canvas can be very troubling. It can be very daunting because you don't know how to start or what to put on there. It's a big question mark to the artistic puzzle. However, on the other side, the way that the AI starts, it's that it creates the finished image with no steps in between. You enter the information, the finished image comes out. The problem with this, it is also daunting because this can be very overwhelming to the artist. Now, the reason for that is, like I said before, art is a form of puzzle where you try to figure out the expressiveness, the story, the different elements. So you think about, what do I want to have in there? What kind of composition? What kind of perspective? What kind of characters? What kind of colors do I want to use? Things like that. The problem is now when AI is creating the whole image in one go, you are overwhelmed by all of the decisions that the AI has made for you, and it becomes really hard to figure out what you want to change because the AI is so much in your face. So for the artistic process, this is actually not really ideal. Let's think about how AI could be used. And these are just suggestions. For example, AI could be a plugin inside of the software that helps you do some of the tasks faster, but doesn't replace the complete task. Ideas could here be, for example, a Photoshop plugin that helps you to create designs inside of Photoshop. Or it could be a plugin inside of Blender that helps you to create different kind of textures. Or other kind of plugins that are helping you to create photo effects, maybe inside of Lightroom. It could be an AI brush tool, for example, where only the tip of the brush is AI, and while you paint away and set stroke on your digital canvas, the AI is filling in the things you want to draw. For example, when you draw a tree, it is growing the tree while you paint the stem and the branches and the leaves. It could also be a background processor, like for example with LCM, what I have showed inside of Krita, where it is processing for you the image while you still paint on a rougher sketch of the image. Or it could be a renderer where, for example, you create 80% of the data inside of a 3D software, and then the rendering with all of the effects and textures is done by AI, just rendering over what you have already created. So here is an example of a sketch AI and actually found 2 different models on Civet AI that already do that. And I think we can improve on that. So the left one is one that creates anime poses. And what you can see here is that with this character, we cannot tell if it is a boy or a woman. We can't really tell the age. We can't really tell if it's an elf or a mage or a warrior or a poet or a musician. We don't know because it's just a sketch. On the right side, we have a sketch of a cityscape. Now, here also we cover 2 things that are often not met by people who use AI, and that is the understanding of complex perspective and how to draw that, but also the understanding of the proportions of a body and the anatomy of a body and how to play with that is also an interesting part. Now, another thing about both of these is that we usually can't draw within a certain focal length for a camera. However, if you would create an artwork or a movie or sketches for a video game or a film, you would want to have the information in there where the sketch is prepared in a specific focal length. For example, 24mm for something that's more wide angle. Or for a portrait, you would use 85mm or 105mm and different forms of aperture on top of that. Now, this is important because if you do sketches, for example, for movies, they often have to be in the correct focal length because otherwise you can't really show what is going on in the scene and how it's actually going to look inside of the movie, which is often why these kind of sketches are created by 3D software today. So here, for example, from Martin Nebelong, which is an amazing AI artist, he's very creative. He shows a process where he is using basically an AI brush where he's setting down a green line, and through the prompt, the green line is then turned into a snake. So he can paint the shape of the snake, how the snake is moving through the picture with his brush, and then the AI is just doing the final parts. But of course, the final parts are the most time intense. Here's another example of one of his amazing processes where he is sculpting in real time in 3D. And then on the right side, you see the work of LCM, where this is rendering this into a full model. Now, again, the important thing here is you can see on the left side that the model is still very basic and it is very flat, has very little details because this is just the base sculpting. And on the right side, you have a lot of details in there that are rendered on top of the 3D model because of the prompt, so that this is turning, in this case, into an older man. But of course, on the right side, what you would have to do to create all these details, all these textures, all these finer little elements in there would take hours upon hours. So the AI is saving you a lot of time, but also on the left side, because there is so little information in this very basic sculpting, you are still artistically very open to change anything you want to do. And because of that, you can do a very rapid prototyping. You can change, you can be inspired, and you can look backward and forward between the very basic model and the rendered version of that. And that actually keeps you in the artistic flow, the artistic freedom, the artistic expressiveness. And this, of course, also takes into consideration the different specialized tools that have developed by software developers over decades. And make no mistake in thinking that you can simply replace that by creating this as a node inside of ComfyUI. While you probably could do some of these things and they work to a certain degree, it is also true that these specialized tools from different developers, like for example Adobe or Nik Collection, have a very specific style to them that creates artistic expressiveness. So for example, if you do a lot of photo editing and you look at photos online, you can clearly tell when a photo has been adjusted and color graded with Adobe Lightroom, because Lightroom and Adobe, with also Camera Raw, has a very specific way to adjust colors and they give you a certain expression. On the other hand, if you use Nik Collection, which is based on analog photography, you get very different colors, you get a very different expressiveness that looks often more warmer, more organic. So But that is also important because different tools lead you to different artistic results. And this is why different artists prefer to use different tools. And that is also a very important part of the variety we see in art and culture. Another thing that is very important to point out here is the artistic requirements that are inside of the software and that are based on not having an image rendered in one go. This is mainly the non-destructive process. Non-destructive means that, for example, if you have layers in Photoshop, that you can still go to these layers and adjust them, and the content has not been rendered into the image. So you have, for example, live filters and smart layers. These will show you the effect of the filter, but not apply it to the image. So you can always go back into the settings and change the adjustments of the filter. The same as with the smart layer, where the content of the layer is preserved and only the adjustments to the layer are previewed to you until you export it into a new format like JPEG or PNG. Of course, also what you have inside of these software tools is very exact adjustments. You can use different plugins to use that, and not to forget the compatibility of the files between these software tools, but also between the different people you work with. So often you will find a process where, for example, you have a photographer who's taken pictures and then adjusting these images. Then this is going to a designer who is putting that into, let's say, a print design. Then this is going to a printer who is then putting this into a printing machine, and so on. It might also go to an animator who's turning this into an animation for a screen, a digital screen, for example, you see in a shop or an airport. So this might go through a lot of people, and they have to be able to open your files, and the effects are still preserved in that. They still work fine while you have the live filters and the smart layers. So having a landscape where the files are compatible with the different tools, with the different people you use, that is something that is very important for the artistic process. So here's the process that I want to suggest. On the left side, you have a sketch. Now this sketch has been done by a person. You can see it's a very expressive sketch. It has beautiful, expressive, dynamic body pose, a lot of strength, a lot of beauty in there, a lot of story in there in the way the woman is sitting and holding that sword. Of course, also it has the right proportions. It has very nice anatomy, but at the same time it is so reduced to just a sketch that you can do a lot of things with that. You can imagine to have a model that is just trained to give you these kind of dynamic poses, which by the way is something that AI has a lot of hard time with, creating expressive, beautiful poses that actually tell already a story about the character, about the scene. Then, of course, on the right side, you can simply colorize that in a very simple way, but this simple way already gives you a lot of ability to actually put information, to put artistic decision into that sketch without being overwhelmed by the final result. So when we go here to the next step, you can see through the prompting and through the painting, I can define that the gray areas are going to be shiny armor, while the red areas are going to be soft fabric. So this already gives me a lot of choices, and I can always go back to the left side, especially because I have layers on top of layers where I can just erase some part of the image while the rest of the image keeps preserved in that state, that I can very quickly change parts of that image. And on top of that, when you have the sketches below the colors, they give more detail to the AI to understand what I want to render. Now, the interesting thing here is this is not using ControlNet. This is not using IPA. It is just an image-to-image render. And by that, you can already see how by preparing the information in a certain way and to a certain degree of quality, you can get amazing results even with simple techniques that often are better than what you could get with the model on its own. Now here's another example I want to show you. On the left side, again, we have a sketch for a body pose, and on the right side, we have colored in different ways, different character designs, which means with the same proportions, with the same anatomy, with the same pose, you can very quickly iterate through different ideas to build up a character, the style, the clothing, the colors of the clothing, even the ethnicity, the skin color, and so on, and then turn that very rapidly into finished designs. But again, you can see here when you compare the right side to the left side, the right side has so much detail in it that it can be very overwhelming, while the left side has so little detail in there that the imagination can fly and grow, and you can see different kinds of clothing and patterns and ways to change the character. So you can always go to the left side and paint over that. In this case, it's also interesting to point out that I first painted the complete body with the skin color and then drew the clothing over that so that I can keep the skin color and can freely change the clothing anywhere on the body I want. Here we also have the last example, and you can see, because the sketch is below the coloring and shines through, that we can clearly also see that the AI can follow the anatomy and the pose with the legs even below the skirt, where it actually can't see the legs, but it still works beautifully. Here we have other ideas, other concepts. This is from Mick Mumpitz. He's an amazing artist and also YouTuber for AI creation. Here he shows that he is using a 3D input animation for an AI rendering. You can see how well that works, where you create a basic 3D concept without any textures, without any finer details to the 3D model, to the 3D animation, and then you can render this in different styles as an actual movie. Now here's another element from him, and this is using a light map. And you can see in the two different pictures below that this is actually using the light input that he has proposed with this light map onto the scene, and it's working very well. So by preparing this kind of information, you can actually get a lot of control into your video, and you preserve the different layers, the different steps of the artistic process. You can make changes at each of these steps and then render it again. Of course, what this requires is a different process where we have to think about training the models in a specific way, developing the AI tools in a way that fits the creative process, having, for example, plugins inside of different software tools so that AI is not just replacing the complete process, but fitting into the process that is happening right now, and by that giving us a lot more control. Here you can see an example where I use 3D models that are very detailed from a page that is called Bash Kit. Now this can be then rendered over in a different style, and you can see how well this follows these 3D models. In this case, I didn't actually use the 3D image, I used a depth map, but I have created a depth map inside of a 3D software called Blender, because there I have a lot more control over the depth map and also get much finer details out of that than when I would use it inside of the AI software. But because of that, you can see that I can have a very fast prototyping. I can change the camera angle, I can change the artistic style, I can change a lot of that and still have a lot of control over the perspective, over the focal length, over the composition in the image. I can move the buildings around and so on and so on. So there is a lot of potential to these kind of techniques. Another element that we see here is the photo processing. This is another thing that is very difficult for AI, especially with Stable Diffusion, because if you have an image, for example, with 3000 by 5000 pixel resolution, so a full scale resolution photo from the camera, Stable Diffusion simply can't do that because it can only render in smaller resolutions and then upscale it. But if you do that, a lot of the information in the image is changed. Now, of course, this is a huge problem, especially with real people, because they know what their face looks, and if they are famous, their fans also know specifically what their face looks like. So even if you might think, well, that face almost looks like that person, they will recognize us. They will look at it and say, well, my lips are a little bit different. My nose is not that wide. My eyes are a tiny bit different. They will see the difference. The fans will know the difference. So our job is to figure out how can we have more control? How can we have more precision? How can we integrate AI in a way that allows us to be artistically experimental, playful, and express what we as humans want to show, not some kind of random image that the AI is creating. Here, I have a little bit of a chart. There's many more steps to the creative process. This is just to show you some of them. I split it up into 3 different areas of pre-production, production, and post-production. This can be applied to many areas in the creative process. Each of this could be an AI product that would be extremely valuable inside of the creative industries and, of course, inside of how artists work and think. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I see you soon in one of my other videos, and thank you very much. Bye.